the most memorable workplace meltdown you ever witnessed? Story 1. I work in hospitality. Our old head of housekeeping was a small Polish woman with a spitfire personality. She refused to hire minorities or heavier women, even though some of the best cleaners we've ever had were one of those too. She worked 7 days a week, at least 50 hours total. She was burning herself out hardcore. She was very paranoid and always afraid someone was out to get her position. Well, one morning she got into it with one of our best housekeepers. She grabbed the woman's wrist and gave her an Indian burn. Then she came to the front desk, yelling and screaming, and threw herself to the floor like a toddler having a tantrum, kicking her arms and legs. This was in the middle of a busy check-in window as well. And here she's rolling on the ground, crying and yelling. I looked at her and said, "Get her to the office if you're going to have a meltdown." So she picked herself up, then threw herself down in the office and finished her tantrum there. She was fired that day. Story 2. While I was at college learning metalworking, our teacher got so pissed off with the complete lack of respect attention by his students that he stormed out of the engineering lab and got in his car, then drove off, only to hit a lamppost at nearly 30 miles per hour. He got out of his car, pushed it off the lamppost, which fell over and nearly took him out. He drove off with steam coming out of the bonnet of his new Porsche. Meanwhile, he had left an aluminum crucible on full heat, which literally went in a meltdown. Molten metal started bubbling and bursting out of the crucible like a volcano. Where the molten metal touched anything flammable, it started a fire. When molten metal starts erupting, you know you're having a bad day. He was remarkably not fired, and all of his students made rapid life adjustments and never disrespected him again. Story 3. I got into a screaming match with my boss. He was furious, and after the altercation, I saw him head to the elevator. I knew he was going to human resources, so I ran down the stairs and beat him to the HR office by about 20 seconds. He had to sit in the HR waiting room for half an hour until I was done speaking to them, which made him even more furious. Edit wow. Thanks for the gold. Story 4. I didn't witness this myself, but a former coworker did. She worked at a law firm in one of the upper floors of the Empire State Building. She was in an office with another coworker interviewing a client when the coworker just mumbled something, got up, walked over to a window, and jumped out to his death. Edit, I actually found an old newspaper article about it. Story 5. I didn't actually witness this. I did it. I was working at a Wendy's my senior year of high school, with that being my second job. The first was the McDonald's across the street. McDonald's taught me drive-through, and Wendy's got 110th the business, so I was a drive-through god there. One night, there was a football game we didn't know about, and when it let out, we got absolutely slammed. I was working 3 positions in drive-through, which I could handle, but when I had to do fries, I couldn't deal with it. I asked the guy who was working front counter, who hadn't had a customer in about an hour, to hop on fries and help me out. He mumbled something and walked over there. I relax and go back to drive-through, and when I go to bag my order, I see all this kid did was drop a basket of fries, not make any of the 20 orders we had. At first, I was like, I got this, and made a large fry. I then turned and threw it at him, calling him a lazy incompetent. You can't even work a fast food job. Walked back to the office and tossed my headset at the manager and told him I quit. Story 6. I worked in a building with a cafeteria in it. We noticed that one of the everyday cashiers had stopped showing up to work and found out that she had passed away. My coworker asked who we were talking about, and upon finding out, stood up from her desk, flung herself to the ground, and proceeded to roll back and forth, crying as loud as she could. We all freaked out. We had customers on the phone. We had to put on hold until we could get her feet, and someone put her somewhere else so she could calm down. She took the next few days off, including the day of the funeral, assuming she had gone to the funeral. We asked her how it was. She answered with, "Huh, I didn't go. I barely knew her." Story 7. My own. I worked as a pharmacy technician on night shifts. It was the only 24-hour pharmacy close to a hospital with a staggeringly busy ER room. Percocet was handed out like candy. Well, we had this one repeat offender who was everything wrong with the system. She doctor shopped, screamed the walls down if she didn't get what she wanted, and called us every name under the sun. Management didn't care, because it was business as usual, and furthermore, when you get into working night shifts at a pharmacy in a city, you start to understand the element. I had an exceptional level of patience, until one day, she just got under my skin. Her copay was 50 cents. She screamed at me because her copay was usually zero, not true, and that she couldn't afford it. She had just bought cigarettes at the front counter. By the way, she got in my face and screamed that I was trying to kill her, and that she wouldn't be able to take care of her son. She then turned to him and pointed at me, saying I was the terrible woman that was killing mommy. I lost it. I don't know why this moment did it, but it did. I slammed my hands down on the counter, came from behind the register, and got face-to-face with her, telling her she needed to leave before I called the cops because I was sick of her. She squared up with me, nose to nose, But when she saw I wasn't backing down, she stepped back and then proceeded to ask me to pay the 50 cents for her copay. She told me I could afford it. My coworker saw what was going on and pushed me to the back room to chill out. I don't know how that situation ended because I was in the back room blowing off steam, but the next time a lady came back, she refused to be helped by me, which was probably best. I'm not proud of my ridiculous behavior, and I can't defend myself for that, but man, I had never felt anger like that before. Story 8, I worked in a shop as a cashier for a while, and during a really busy rush period, there's only me and this other woman on tills anyway. We're working away, and suddenly there's a police officer and my manager watching, and they point at the woman working with me. Then they promptly walk over and take her away. She didn't go easy, though. She was doing the whole sovereign citizen thing, shouting about rights. She thought she had like a lawyer being present at the arrest or whatever, then started crying about needing to get her son or whatever. I distinctly remember this because I was annoyed they didn't put anyone else on to help me, and a customer made a snarky comment about queue times. Like my colleague just legit got arrested for theft. What do you want me to do, Linda? Go put your 8 candle through the self-service, Christ. Story 9, I was in 5th grade, and we had this social studies teacher who was strangely resemblant of Colonel Sanders named Dr. King. He was high-strung, a little overly touchy physically and emotionally, and he loved his map of the world. It was one of those maps that requires a string to be pulled down in order to reveal it. Dr. King would not let anyone but him pull it down. One of my friends named Orrin was a bit of a bad seed, had consistently get into trouble because he was kind of mischievous little. One day we were in social studies and Dr. King was about to use his precious prized map of the world for his lesson. We were all being heads on this day. All the while Dr. King is trying desperately to maintain composure. Orrin, gassed up on the attention of his friends, volunteers to help Dr. King pull the map down. In a moment of tenderness and foolishness, Dr. King agreed to let Orrin open up the map. Orrin, so ecstatic that of all the kids he was the one allowed to do this, runs up to the map string and clutches it. He then pulls it down with the force of a tank, and the map tears in half. Dr. King goes completely white with anger. He starts babbling and repeating one phrase over and over. Why would you do this? 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 He can't even reprimand Orrin properly. He's just stuck in a loop at this point. The next day, Dr. King did not show up for class, and that continued through the rest of the entire semester. Orrin broke Dr. King. TLDR kid breaks teacher's prize map. Teacher blows a gasket and can't stop saying, why would you do this? Never shows back up to class. Story 10, my wife and I were walking in downtown Chicago last summer, and we saw 2 furniture movers get into a tiff. We slowed our pace to witness the bit of drama that escalated into one of the guys using a floor lamp like a baseball bat while the other's weapon of choice was a bath, edit spelling. Story 11, when I was a teenager, I worked at a job where the general manager's husband was sleeping with the assistant manager. The assistant manager flaunted it too. She would go around saying things like, he told me, I give better head than you do, and no wonder your husband cheats. I would cheat if I were married to you. Anyway, one day, the general manager finally snaps, and they get into a full-on cat fight right in front of the entire store. We had to call the police to break them up. It is pretty bad when the teenage crew can act more civilized than the adult managers. Story 12 posted this somewhere else before, but at my old store, we had a high schooler employed as a cashier because her dad worked as the deli assistant manager. Everything was fine. She was a little bratty and wouldn't listen to me or any of the other service leads, but she did her job all right. Her dad got caught selling ecstasy and weed in the parking lot and was arrested, and she was promptly put under investigation too. Eventually, they found out that she had been stealing from a register, and she was arrested during one of my shifts. I watched as they told her why she was being arrested, that charges were being pressed, and that she was officially fired. This 16-year-old tries to resist arrest, falls to the ground, and begins to beat on the floor while tearing at her uniform. They managed to get her hands behind her back after she had gotten her shirt off. Once she's in cuffs, she begins to shout that she's going to sue everyone because they're looking at her body and she's underage, and don't they know who she is, and she knows people who will us all up. They put her in the back of the cop car, and she thrashed around trying to escape, banging on the divider, and trying to get her hands on the cops. Not sure what happened to her after they drove away. Story 13, suit guy. We worked in a business casual office. Most of us just wore button-up shirts, decent pants, and dress shoes every day. However, suit guy showed up as a new hire and wore the same exact tin suit every day for the 3 months he was there, which is what earned him the nickname. He also drank a large coffee, a Monster Energy drink, and a can of Mountain Dew in that order between when he walked in at 8 and when he had lunch at noon. Apparently, he was going through a divorce that was getting pretty contentious, and the combination of caffeine and rage put him over his boiling point one morning when he began screaming at his phone while at his desk, and then broke his cell phone in half. This was 2012, so it was a full-screen smartphone that he somehow bent until it broke. I don't know how he did it. My friends and I tried to replicate it using one of my old phones a couple days later, and we could cause some bending, but no break. He came in the next day with a new phone and acted like he hadn't made a scene the day before. Story 14, probably mine. I was doing car sales at 19 and was pretty successful at it. I was on pace to clear 100K that year, about 4 months in. Anyway, we got our checks on time, and as I checked over my commission check, I noticed it was short. I grabbed my file and confirmed that there were 3 cars missing on the list of cars I was paid commission on. I calmly went to my sales manager and explained everything. He suggested I go to the accounting department with all my paperwork and explain to them. So I did. When I was done there, they said I had to go to the president's office and show him. So I did. When I was done with him, he sent me back to the sales manager. Even though I told him ID already showed him, he sent me to accounting, and she sent me to you. So back I went. I told him what had happened, and he told me he couldn't help me, that it was the accounting department that made the checks. So I went back there, and she said if it was a mistake they made, I had to get it approved by the president, who was unwilling to help. So I went to my desk, trying to calm down. I was hot, and my manager came over and asked me to help someone that was aimlessly wandering on the lot. I clicked. I asked him why would I try to sell more of your vehicles when you won't pay me for the ones I did sell. He looked shocked and started to yell at me how it wasn't his fault, and I needed to do what he said. So I went ballistic. I told him to get the out of my way while I gathered up and took it to my car as he pled with me not to quit. I told him he should expect me to come back and shoot up all the windows if I didn't get my check of what they owed me in the mail. I left peeling out. It was a huge scene, but it was over 20 years ago, and in condensing it, I got home and called the labor board immediately. They sent me a packet of papers to fill out, and I did as soon as I got them. Made copies of all my paperwork, proving they owed me about $1,800 or so, and got them in the mail. Within a week, I had a check in my mailbox from the dealer. I did not go shoot out their windows. I probably should have, though. I'm guessing they were trying to pull one over on me, since I was 19 and green to selling cars. Bastards. Story 15 was shopping at a stop-in shop one day about 10 years back, picking up some odds, and before going home, when I overheard some guy getting torn down by his manager. He was in the process of cleaning up broken jar jam or some such, and his manager was just totally ripping in him. Do you know how long this mess has been here? Why does it seem like I'm always leading you around like a dog just to get you to work? Do you know how many people would kill to have your job? The worker was a skinny dude, maybe 17 or 18, and was sort of just gritting his teeth and keeping it cool despite the barrage of insults. After he gets things cleaned up, he pushes the mop bucket away down the aisle, and the manager walks off. I go into the aisle to get some peanut butter and just see him stop his tracks and take a deep, shuddering breath. His hands clench and unclench, and he walks on. I continue shopping, and he disappears. About 10 minutes later, as I'm checking out, I once again see this manager publicly tear into the same guy for not being up front and bagging for customers. Despite repeated calls he's doing the best he can bagging while under this duress, but eventually lets I'm doing the best I can, man out under his breath. This seems to incense the manager, who goes on about how his best isn't good enough and how he's not representing the Stop and Shop brand. Kid finally just stops working and stares at the manager for a moment before, with arms shuddering with rage, grabbing at his shirt. With a rage-filled yell that silences the checkout area, he rips the shirt off his chest like Hulk Hogan, throws it into his manager's face, then calmly walks out of the store. Everyone's just shocked, and the manager walks away, speechless with the remains of the shirt. The silence is pierced by someone on the intercom, saying clean up, aisle 7, and once more items are checked out. Story 16 worked in a video store when there was such a thing. My coworker showed up very, very high. He was also about 63 and 140 pounds, so he stood out in a crowd to begin with. Anyway, he came in for a 4-hour shift, stood in the middle of our bank of checkout registers, and just ate chips. Like 6 bags of chips back to back. And he ate them slow and savored the out of each bite. The whole time he had zero facial expression. Think of the dull stare of a chewing dairy cow. After about 3 hours, he calmly turns to me and says I can't do this anymore, gently sets down his bag of chips, and walks out the door. We never saw him in the store again. Story 17. There was an Arab man named Ahmed that delivered food to the factory I worked at a few years ago. He was the nicest guy I ever met. Always gave me free food, just for being respectful to him. One day, he was delivering food to employees who had to work on Sunday, and they were all whining and complaining about how unfair it is, even though they were being paid double time. Apparently, Ahmed had heard enough because in front of the whole plant, he began to scream at all of them for being ungrateful crybabies and reminded them how good they have it in America. I had never seen the factory so quiet. I asked him what was up as he left, and he explained to me how he had come here from the Middle East to escape famine and terrorism, and he started with nothing and worked all day, every day, to get where he is now. It was one of the most motivating things I've ever witnessed. Story 18, this crazy lady they hired as a cashier didn't take getting fired too well. After they fired her, she told the owner to off and proceeded to ram his truck with her car as she left. And it's funny because it barely dented the owner's bumper, but her car got really up. I don't even think he pressed charges. Story 19 was interning at a local ABC news station for a while. One day, I was alone on the set, sitting on one of those couches you always see anchors sitting on in morning shows. I was waiting for my boss to come down and tape something for a show. Enter the weatherman. He walks over to his desk, looks at something on the computer, stands up, slams his hand on the table, and yells at the top of his lungs, "This is so out of control. Are you kidding me?" Then straightens up his tie, calmly and coolly walks by me again, and says "Pardon my French," and walks out the door. I sit for a minute in shock, and then go upstairs. Turns out the National Weather Service was trying to get him in trouble because someone reported a live tornado in a distant corner of the state, when there actually wasn't a tornado at all, and caused the sirens to go off. I think that's at least what I got out of what him and the other weatherman were talking about. I have a good one. I worked at Target a good long while ago, and as a cashier, I usually took the express lanes. The express lanes were extremely annoying to work at. It was like a magnet for trouble. Everyone broke the 15 items or less. And I'm not talking about like a couple. They brought full carts to the lane, and at Target, you aren't allowed to say anything about it. You just finish the checkout and move on. And, of course, you would get sighs from people who thought you weren't moving quick enough. And for some reason, 12 to 14-year-olds had an obsession with buying condoms and acting either extremely straight-faced like ID deny them or giggling uncontrollably. So it was a bit annoying working the express lane. Well, that brings me to Suzette. She was a regular. Every single day, she would buy multiple pairs of shoes and a full cart of groceries, going past the 15 items or less by like 30 to 40 items in the middle of the day, clogging up my whole lane. But I dealt with her. She liked to chat and had this ridiculously annoying laugh. She would say something that was not a joke. It was just a statement and laugh like she was at a comedy show. My grandmama liked to call Target, spend over 100 store ha-ha like that was a real bellyacre lady. She would also flirt with me, and she was very upfront. "What you carrying? Them khakis ain't doing much for the eyes, but I know you got something hiding, and I can tell from the broad shoulders you got a secret too big to keep to yourself. And oh, my favorite bagger is here today." And so on, followed by extreme laughter again. I still just dealt with her and got her out as quick as possible. The real kicker was that she returned everything. All the shoes and clothes she ended up coming back to return. But moving on this day, I was assigned a different lane, and I had to shut my light off to clean up and restock my mini shelf. My coworker Nick was working at express lanes. I heard the familiar laughs, and I heard her say my name and ask about me. Then she began to flirt with him and had her boy bring an extra cart along. 2 full carts and a ton of shoes. Nick lost his cool. He threw the shoes and boxes on the floor and all over the place. He pushed over the mini rack and started cussing her out like big time. He yelled at her so much she started calling threats out, saying she was going to get her cousins to come back and her husband to come back, blah, blah, blah. He pulled off his shirt and walked to the employee lounge, still spouting off the whole way there. Shirtless were after a small delay of her getting her shoes for free and Nick being in the detention room, he was fired. What's really funny about all this is that Nick was a short dude, and he didn't seem the type to flip, but he yanked off that shirt and he was shredded. He had the full muscle set. TLDR. Annoying customer, repeat offender of annoyances, and unfunny jokes got a coworker extremely angry and caused him to break the aisle and scream at her. Story 20 worked with a sales rep who was about to get fired for faking his expense reports. He knew it was going to happen because corporate called a restaurant where he was pulling a scam from, and they did some research and found it all out and got the law involved. He took his company car, a Saab 9000 CD, and left it in the worst part of town with the keys in it. Hoping it would get stolen, pure spite on his part, unfortunately, he didn't plan for how he was going to get out of this part of town, so he got mugged and they kicked out of him. Ambulance came and took him to the ER. I should add here that he was about 25 or so and a complete. The interesting part, he tried to go out on work comp due to his injuries and stayed away from the office because he knew he was going to get fired. I had to visit him at his home and explain that he was going to be fired and that he could keep the law out of this if he paid the money back. It was $2,500. He said he was on pain pills due to his injuries and couldn't understand what I was saying. He stays at home for 2 weeks, recovering from his injuries. Hay raced the meltdown after the doctor releases him. He comes back to work. The day he comes back, the legal team and the police are waiting for him. He gets formally fired and the police arrest him. I should add that the whole thing was being recorded by the legal team on video. After they put the cuffs on him, he immediately drops to the ground screaming that he is injured and in severe pain and doesn't deserve to be treated like this. The police grab him and throw him in the back of the police car while he's screaming like a baby the whole time. What he didn't know is that there was a video camera in the police car. Once the police put him in the back of the car and then went back inside, leaving him alone in the car, he stopped crying and started laughing. This dragged on for years. My firm refused to back down, and we prosecuted him for everything we could. Story 21 was working at a call center place, different major company, taking inbound calls for Verizon, was still in 2-month paid training, and one lady flipped one day in the break room. She was normally a good person, was nice, and always talked about how she loved God and church, not in a crazy way either. But then one day a bunch of people were talking, and she just straight up started saying, "I hope you're going to take that back," and they had no idea what she was on about. Then she went on a rant about how everyone was talking about her or conspiring against her, and how they were all laughing at her. And this whole time she's screaming at the top of her lungs at them. And the guy who she was mainly yelling at just said, "Miss, I have never talked to you in my life. Why would I start talking about you when I don't even know you?" She didn't turn up for the rest of in-class training, but when we started call training, she was there with us. Apparently, she had gone through a psych evaluation and such and was found to have acted out of stress. I genuinely felt bad because I know that feeling of losing control, and am sorry she had to experience that at work. And since people are fickle, we, the rest of our 7-person class, had to scorn people for calling her the crazy schizo lady, because that's just not right. Some people just don't have control under stress. It's all a learning experience, MO. Story 22, we had a crazy Asian lady in the office who used to like to pick fights with the people who worked around her. The bosses moved her to another section, and one day, she picked on an older, mild-mannered Jewish guy. He let her have it, but good. Her usual nasty remarks were met with a verbal pounding from this guy that was beyond hilarious. Since it was early in the morning and most of us weren't in yet, one of the guys who sat within earshot transcribed the whole thing while it was happening. That old man shut that SHD down. Story 23, my own, was working at a Target store as the electronics team lead, which mostly meant standing at the camera counter waiting for someone to need something at the time of the release of the Nintendo Wii. It had a very poor launch with a lot of scarcity. My store was kind of in a rural area, and we usually got like maybe 6 consoles a week shipped to us, maybe 3 at a time. 2 random days, they came through our regular truck system at 4 a.m. and were immediately put onto the shelf and lockup. First come, first serve. Even team members had to wait until 8 a.m. and were not allowed to put one aside. At the height of the frenzy, we had customers waiting at the door, like 5 to 8 of them, usually every single day to try and get one. With that said, I had a woman who would come in every single day at around 1 p.m. and ask if we had any. Every day, I repeated what I typed above about how if she wants one, she's going to have to get up earlier, because they're always gone by 8:15. She always accused us of stockpiling them in the back, saying things like, "Oh, I know you have them. You're lying. Who are you holding them for?" I am the epitome of a good service person at this point in time. I am polite, patient, and attempting to give her all the info I can to help her attain one of these consoles. As December edges on, and this woman still has not managed to change her tactics, or, unsurprisingly, get a Wii, she finally found my breaking point when she screamed this at me: "You're going to ruin my kid's Christmas." I couldn't take any more. I was done with this woman. I slammed my hands down on the counter and said something to the effect of, "You know what? I'm done. There's nothing in this world that I want more than to ruin Christmas for you and for your kids. I hate Christmas. I hate your children. I have a dream about building a fort out of Nintendo Wii's and hiding in it when I see you coming. Do you want to see the stock room? It's right over there. And if you find a Wii console in it, I will buy it for you." I held out my magnet keys, knowing she wouldn't take them, while she stood there with her mouth agape for a little while, and then, without saying a word, turned and left. I never saw her again, and, miraculously, she apparently didn't say anything to anyone on her way out, because I continued working there without any of my coworkers ever knowing it had happened. I felt guilty at one point, but mostly just satisfied, looking back. Now, I wouldn't be able to basically scream at a customer without cursing, and that would definitely get me fired. Story 24 worked at Walmart for about 2 years before my current job. I worked back in layaway, and was one of the employees that was up for CSM Customer Service Manager. Basically, you're a supervisor that's under an assistant manager along with a few others. I didn't get it. I was somewhat disappointed, but still figured, hey, I still like what I do in layaway. So next time, one of the other cashiers at got pissed off and yelled this is bullshit, and shoved a whole bunch of stuff that was on a shelf in the office where he was being notified onto the floor and stormed out of the office. He was sent home and fired a few days later. Story 25, after my buddy passed Psych 101, he considered himself Machiavelli reincarnate. He had an idea for a new app he pitched as Yelp for dating. You could post reviews of your dates and find out who was cool and who were those psycho to avoid. Plus, you could find out what people really thought of you behind their polite facades. He rounded up some programming geeks on campus, and even went so far as to name our company Tom Sawyer. The geeks thought it was a Rush reference. They were mistaken. My buddy's plan was essentially to get everyone else to do his work for free. Like Tom Sawyer, extolling the virtues of whitewashing that fence. The gold star and praise method worked for a couple of weeks until one guy finally caught on all that we were hiding in plain sight. So when do we get our stock options? We'll be ready to launch in a few more weeks. My buddy would obfuscate about how we were all doing this for the greater good of average frustrated chumps everywhere. I mean, what guy doesn't want to find out what it is about him that rubs women the wrong way? Bro code, dude. We got to help one another. Finally, the Spartacus in our midst had enough, only in a passive-aggressive, geeky sort of way. When we opened up the garage the next night, all the computer screens were flashing Rush sucks, and we discovered he had deleted every last line of our code. TLD, our friend thought he was Mark Zuckerberg, deliberately tried to get people to program his app for free with no IPO options. Story 26, there was a guy I used to work with. He was the most boring, straight-laced guy you could ever meet. He was very into entomology and environmental presentation. He used to do things like count the crayfish in a patch of creek at the weekend. He spoke very quietly, and I often couldn't hear him even when I sat right next to him. We worked in a call center, and he was renowned as one of the best agents you could get calling through. He was so patient and gentle with even the dumbest sheep of customers. It was hard on him, though. He was the kind of guy who flushes really obviously when he got pissed off. You could sit next to him, watching him quietly seethe as he gently said, "Yes, ma'am." Now, if you could just click the text under the sign-in button that says "Forgotten you details." Then one afternoon, he just couldn't hack anymore. I have no idea what it was that got to him. This woman must have said something, though, cause he just screamed "fuck off" down the phone line and threw his headset across his desk. Then he picked up his office chair and kind of rammed it into the wall and marched out the room. 10 minutes later, he came back, quietly apologized to the manager, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Story 27, not so much a meltdown, but an epic walkout. I witnessed 2 employees walk out on their shift, leaving the restaurant unattended. While flipping off the security camera that our boss was watching, I told the full story of this a few months ago, not me, but 2 people I worked with. I worked at a sushi restaurant that had a really high turnaround rate. The reason why is because one of the owners was a huge who loved to yell at people. I saw people come and go. Most usually lasted only a few days. There was a sushi chef there that had been there for a while. He was pretty cool, and we got along great when we worked together. His girlfriend also worked there as a cashier, and a lot of times they were scheduled together. One Saturday that I was supposed to be off, I get a call from Carol, the boss, asking me if I could come in. Apparently Max and his girlfriend had had enough of her, and they both just straight up left and walked out of the restaurant. The place was pretty small, so usually it was just the cooks in the back, the sushi chef, and the cashier delivery driver. So when they left, I basically left the place empty aside from the cooks, who did not speak English that well. I decided to take the shift for the extra money, and when I got there, Carol was already there behind the sushi prep area making orders. She usually didn't come in at all on weekends, but would still watch the security cameras occasionally from her laptop at home, and if she saw you standing around doing nothing, she would call and yell at you. It turns out that was exactly what she did to Max and his girlfriend, and they had finally had enough. Carol showed me the security footage of Max yelling at her over the phone, hanging up, then taking off his apron, and both him and his girlfriend flipping at the security camera and walking out. She was showing me because she couldn't believe how disrespectful they were and how they could just leave the restaurant like that when there were customers in it. Personally, I thought it was pretty they walked out together. I know I wanted to quit hundreds of times when I was there, but I was a broke college student that needed the money. Last I heard of them was they both got jobs at the sushi place that was competing with the restaurant I worked at.